procurement involves obtaining something. Now, something in this case could be tangible, things like shoes, car, a book, or it could refer to intangible stuff like services, internet, for example, cleaning services, and all that. Now, procurement usually starts with need identification, okay? You identify a need, and once those needs are met through goods or services that have been procured for the purpose of meeting those needs, then that usually completes the procurement process. Let's say the marketing department wants to start developing content for social media. What do they need? Maybe a camera, computers, some software. All these are things that they need. And those needs are going to trigger the procurement process, which is going to involve a series of steps, which will see to it that the needs are properly met. So when we talk about procurement, it's not just about purchasing, okay? Purchasing is just part of procurement. In this video, we look at the categories of spend that an organization may purchase. Basically, the various forms of procurement that will exist in an organization, or the various roles or the various shapes that procurement is going to take in an organization. And that will mean looking at things like definition of procurement and purchasing and supply, typical breakdown of organizational costs represented by procurement of goods, service, or constructional work, stock and non-stock procurement, direct and indirect procurement, capital purchases and operational expenditures, as well as service procurements, and many more. Now, procurement is actually bigger. We already said that procurement is bigger than purchasing. With procurement, you have to think of things like added value, cost, inventory, logistics, purchasing, quality, supply, waste management. While purchasing, on the other hand, is basically the act of physically ordering and buying something. As for supply, this is the infrastructure which ensures that products or services get from the supplier to the customer. Think of it this way. A friend is talking to you about his business and he says, I need your help with procurement. And you ask if he has any procurement strategy, to which he says, not really, I just purchase things if and when I need them. So what your friend has been doing is more of purchasing and not procurement as a whole. Your friend is not doing any supplier research or price comparison. He isn't checking for quality, assessing cost of getting orders delivered, or even monitoring stock in the warehouse and other things. All of which are things that are necessary if you're going to save money through procurement. Now at this point, you should be in a position to explain what procurement is, what is purchasing, as well as what supply is. The thing you need to remember at this point is that when you talk about cost, you're not just talking about monetary, okay? Cost doesn't have to be monetary. A cost in an organization is an amount payable in return for receiving something. Well, that sounds like if it's all about money. So yes, that can be money, or rather cost can be money. But cost can also mean something like time, material, effort, as well as opportunity. So cost is not always money. Think about that, okay? I mean, yes, it's obvious for you to think about money and talk about cost, but it's more than money, okay? Think of all those things, time, and that stuff. Fixed, variable, direct, and indirect cost are some of the ways in which we can classify costs in organization, okay? When we talk about fixed costs, for instance, these are the sort of costs that do not change with they don't change with the level of production. Think of something like rent. So if your business sells $10,000 a month or $100,000 a month, does that change the rent that you're going to pay in that building? And the answer is no, because that is a fixed cost. So fixed costs are costs that don't change with the level of production, unlike variable costs, which do change with the level of production. So something like raw material, the more you use it, the more you incur the cost relating to raw material. So that is a variable cost. We can also classify cost as direct and indirect. Of course, we're going to talk about direct and indirect later, but just so we're on the same page, all costs that are attributed to whatever it is that you're producing, those ones are going to be direct costs. Okay? While the costs that are not related to what you're producing are going to be variable cost. Think of it from this point of view. If you're making something like, if you're making like, the batteries, okay, for the camera, then all the costs associated with the manufacturing of that, okay, are going to be direct. But then the cost of somebody who's going to market these is not really directly attributed to the production of that battery, and therefore that is going to be indirect. Basically, those ones are going to be part of the overheads, all right? Yeah, we'll talk about that again. So, fixed cost, variable cost, direct cost, indirect cost. You probably know this already. Procurement can be about things that are tangible or intangible. It can also be direct or indirect. But even with that in mind, we can still have the sort of procurement and organization or rather we can still classify procurement as stock procurement or non-stock procurement. With stock procurement, you have to think of things like raw materials. In this case, we're talking about things that fall under primary sector, okay, which are just, okay, so what is primary sector? So this refers to industries that deal with products that they extract, directly. They don't really process them. So the raw materials, in short. So this could be things like coffee, okay? People plant coffee, or if you're buying fruits that you're going to use to make juice, then the fruits themselves, they become raw material. So things of that nature. Again, stock procurement can also include things like components. Okay, so components are used to make a product. If you're manufacturing cars, then things like microchips, okay? Those are things that you use to make the car. Or if you're making mobile phones, again, things like microchips, things like batteries, all those are components that are used to make a finished product. And also, when talking about stock procurement, you could be talking about finished products. So in some cases, you're not going to be making things. Sometimes you just buy stuff. If you're in the retail sector, you buy something and then you sell it the way it is. So whatever you're buying is finished product. Think about a supermarket, okay? So most products in a supermarket are bought from wholesalers and then they're sold that way, which means they're just finished stock the way they are. Okay, they're finished goods. All right, here's a pop quiz, okay? Classify the following items in terms of raw material, components, or finished goods. So the items in this case are fish, light bulb, and shoes. So could you classify those ones, okay? So which one is raw material, which one falls under components, which one falls under finished product. And also at this point, I want you to think of an organization in your industry of choice and list the primary and secondary product it uses. Remember what we said, primary products, okay? The ones that are like raw materials, okay? So think of an organization and then list the product. This is an application. Right, so let's move on. Why is understanding stock procurement important? Well, it is actually simple, okay? Stock procurement links to inventory costs and needs to be managed carefully to keep inventory cost as effective as possible. That is the reason why, okay, one of the reasons why it's important to understand stock procurement. Because at the end of the day, everything just comes down to costs and whether the cost is going to be effective or is just going to be wastage of money. With non-stock procurement, okay, we're talking about things like cleaning services, telephone system, internet contract, advertising campaign. Basically, things that are not going to be listed as part of inventory in an organization. It is just as important to achieve good value when procuring non-stock product or service as it is for stock procurements. So we did talk about direct and indirect at an earlier stage. But when talk about direct procurement, we've already established that. So direct procurement means procuring things that are going to be directly associated with what the organization is producing. So directly associated with the goods or the service that you're producing or that you're providing. For example, a car manufacturer buying components to make a car. So the key thing here, okay, the key thing with direct procurement is that you need to understand, rather you need to be careful about the relationship with the suppliers who provide these things. Because think about it, if that thing is directly attributed to whatever it is that you're producing, and you have bad relationship with suppliers, or you don't understand things that can affect the supply flow, then that is going to be a problem. Because if you have shortage, I mean, like sometimes back, but that was due to COVID, right? So sometimes back there was a problem with supply of microchips, okay? And that ended up affecting companies, okay? Companies that made cars, companies that make mobile phones. So the point is, you always need to understand the relationship, and you always need to foster a positive relationship with suppliers when it comes to direct procurement. With indirect procurement, you're procuring goods and services that an organization needs to continue functioning, but do not contribute to the bottom line. For example, marketing or repairing office equipment. Again, yes, while those things are not necessarily involved in whatever it is that you're producing, they can still affect the nature of how your organization operates. For instance, if, yes, you are making cars, right? But then you've hired somebody to come and paint offices, or somebody to come and connect the internet, and those things are poorly done, then that might affect the morale of the people working in the factory or people working in the organization. So still, better supplier relationship, okay, is important. Capital purchases relate to the assets of an organization. Assets are purchased to help a business make money and continue to keep up with market trends. So this is where buying things like plant, property, equipment, machineries come in. So these are assets, okay? Here's a random question. What should a procurement professional consider when sourcing a capital purchase? Yeah, that's something you can think about. Now remember, with capital purchases, okay, so the value of capital purchases will obviously go down with time. Things like buildings, okay, machineries, and that is pretty much what is referred to as depreciation. Part of the skills of the procurement professional is to assess how quickly the asset may depreciate. And that would actually means working cross-functional with the accounting department, okay? So that you figure out the actual rate of depreciation when you are purchasing some of these things. So operational expenditures are the sort of procurements made to ensure that the day-to-day functioning of an organization are effective, okay? They're up to date. And you're talking about things like rent, raw materials, salary, insurance, transport, and all that. So if you think about those things, okay, they're not assets, but they're things we need them, okay, for the organization to function. Yes, you spend a lot of money buying machine. Where are you going to put that machine? You've acquired land. What exactly are you going to do with land? Okay, I mean, yes, it's a factor of production, but you need somebody to come and do something with that land, and that person is going to be paid salaries or wages, and so that becomes an operational expenditure. Now, service procurement is another one of those procurement that you may get involved in. Now, with service procurement, you're talking about the procurement of, well, services, okay? Things like cleaning contracts, insurance, utilities such as electricity, gas, and internet access. So services, they are intangible, and that means their procurement is not going to be as straightforward as, say, buying laptops. Because you see, with buying a laptop, it's easy, you check, you see, does it meet the requirements I want or not? But that is not the same thing with, say, procuring cleaning services. For this reason, the specification for sourcing of services need to be very detailed to explain exactly what is required. Here's what I want you to do at this point. Think of reasons why it's important to include a very detailed specification in service procurement contracts. Right. So those are some of the things that you need to understand. I mean, the point here was for you to understand the various ways in which you can, the various shapes that procurement can take in an organization, or forms of procurement. And we've seen a bunch of them, okay? Whether it's service procurement, whether it's direct, indirect, whether it's, stock, non-stock, things of that nature. And also remember, we've also talked about what procurement is, how it is different from, say, purchasing, and what is supply, and how does that, what is the connection between procurement, purchasing, and supply. If there is any question, as always, do let me know. I'm Moses, and see you in the next video.